Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How's everyone today? Good morning or good afternoon. And today we're talking about a healthy Ramadan, and it's our part 2. And today specifically we're going to be talking about ethical Ramadan, how to be more ethical while we're fasting. And we're going to be talking about taking care of the environment and talking about iftars and recycling. And we will be interviewing a beautiful sister, Harfiyah Haleem, and she's going to be giving us great advice.
Inshallah khair. I can't wait to listen to her. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Angela.
Wa alaikum salam.
And Harfiyah, how are you both?
Salam. Alhamdulillah.
Good. So we are very, very pleased to have today Harfiyah Haleem. She is an activist, a writer on Islam and the environment. She's a trustee of IFEES EcoIslam, and you can find that on www.ifees.org.uk. She's also co-director of the Muslim Women's Collective. Her anthology of essays and lectures by Muslim scholars, Islam and the Environment, was published in 1998, and she helped to edit the Muslim Green Guide in 2008. In 2021, she collaborated with Extinction Rebellion Muslims on the Ramadan campaign with workshops, a food quiz, and a collection of plant-based recipes for iftar. She's also, mashallah, she has also collaborated on her husband's, Professor Abdul Halim, translation of the Quran as the English language advisor, mashallah. And I'm also happy to say
that. Not the only one. There's lots of other people.
There were lots of others, but I remember you because I have to say you are my mother-in-law as well, alhamdulillah. And I remember you spending many, many hours over, 5 years? Poring over the English and the sort of advising on the better words, etc. So I know you have worked a lot on it, mashallah. So, but today with you, we're concentrating on your work as what we call a green activist. I think we can say that because you've been very, very active over the years, maybe a bit less now, as you say, but you are really quite a trailblazer in the Muslim community. So tell us a bit more about you. What, you converted to Islam some decades ago?
1971, just after your husband was born.
MashaAllah. Look at that. Many, many decades. One of the first Muslim converts in Oxford. So after that, obviously, you had the children, you were busy with that, etc. And then you met Professor Abdul Halim, and that's kind of a second chapter in your life. But what led you to be sort of so active in green issues, generally speaking?
Well, when I had always been interested in them, I met some people from the United Nations when we were living in Nigeria, a lot of chats with them about such things. When I was the bit when I was actually starting to compile the book, that was after after we were made redundant, but that was after the first exhibition that we had for the ICRA Trust in London when I was working for them. And we had a section on Islam and the environment, because I met Fazlun Khalid, the founder of IFEES at that time, and he was trying to get his Quran creation, I can't remember the rest of it, it was a slide set at the time, based similar to the one that the WWF had produced on the Assisi conference, and ICRA, that is, allowed him to have it, to show it at the exhibition as part of our exhibition, and they helped to publish the book that went with it. It's now on the website probably still, amongst the resources. It's called Quran Creation and Conservation, that's it. It was made into a set of posters, but thereby hangs a tale. So that was the first thing I really did as getting environmental information about Islam into the public sector. Then, but after that, I wrote the book. Oh, I did write. I think I was writing the book already when that happened, and it took ages and ages to get anybody to publish it. In the same way that another book called Sharing Eden, which I co-wrote with a Muslim, a Christian leader, a Jewish leader, David Shreve, and Rabbi, Reverend David Shreve, and a Rabbi Natan Levy, I think he calls himself, not Levy. And that took ages and ages also to find a publisher, although they had inside help from various people, but eventually it was published by Cube. It contains environmental teachings from Judaism, Islam, and Judaism, not in that order. And we have a chapter each on water and biodiversity and climate change and all sorts of energy and all sorts of other things, and tips on what you can do to help. So that's another book. That was published in 2012, that one. The one you mentioned, A Green Guide to Climate Change, that's not actually that title. It's called A Muslim Green Guide to Reducing Climate Change. It's a booklet, and there's a similar sort of format to the Sharing Eden, but it's all about Islam and has quotes from the Quran and the Hadith on every page to encourage Muslims to do their bit to help the environment, recycling and all that stuff. So that's 3 books. Yes, and then after the 9/11, the government started being difficult, and the American government started to be even more difficult with the Saudi Arabians, and sat on all their money and were on all the committees and saying what they could spend and what they couldn't. And people that were funding Trust had to stop. And very quickly after that, the funding started to run out, and eventually most of us were made redundant. It did carry on for some years, but in 2003, I was made redundant, and also Professor Noibi, who was our resident professor. So, and we had all by then got a proper part of the exhibition called Islam and the Environment, and it had been Science and the Environment, and we had done a teaching pack on that for schools with all the key stages and things in it. Yes, and then when I was made redundant, Fazlun Khalid came back and said, would you like, I mean, having published that book on Islam and the Environment, he said, would you like to be a trustee of IFEES? So that's how I really got into that side of it. Activism as such, I've been active for a long time doing things on the Iraq March, don't attack Iraq. And there were 2 million people on that. Nobody could count them, but never mind. It was very fun. Lots and lots of marches on various topics. One of the first things I was given to do when I became trustee of IFEES, I went on a lobby organised by what was then called, I think, COIN, but has changed its name quite a lot since then, and now called the Climate Coalition. And it's composed of lots and lots of different charitable organisations, including religious groups of various religions. The first thing the lobby we went on, we were sat in a Westminster Hall or somewhere around tables, and we had an MP sent to us to talk to about the environment and what their attitudes were to it. And we got the Liberal spokesman on the environment, who has disappeared from sight now. And his main thing was to make people pay carbon taxes. And I wasn't very enamoured of that way of doing things. But I've been on all sorts of climate marches and numbers and numbers of things. I even spoke at some of them. Not very great speaker, as you can tell. But especially to large audiences.
You're doing well so far. It's really fascinating. So what is exactly IFEES? What does it stand for?
Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Sciences. It also has something to do with electrical engineers. If you look it up on the website, on the Google, so we have opted to try and move slowly to calling it EcoIslam, which is taken from the title of our the journal that we produced for a few years on with the help of money from the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, which is it's still on the website. It's called EcoIslam, and so that seemed to be a much better description of what we were doing than IFEES. It was originally a much more of an amorphous organisation doing charitable work and helping to promote Islamic values, but it turned into the environmental organisation which it is now. Fazl and Khaled had already been busy for years doing inter-religious or multi-faith conferences on the environment, with the Assisi as one of them, and there's one in Japan, and he's always been called up as the Islamic spokesperson, and he's supposed to be one of the top 15 most influential Muslims in the world. So it was very inspiring, and we kept on doing all sorts of things, and we had these meetings every couple of, once or twice a year, two trustees meetings to form policy and so on.
So what sort of successes like you've had over the years? Something like something quite striking in terms of your work with IFEES. What sort of achievement have you had?
Well, the Islamic Declaration is the main one, which is 2015, and that was held in conjunction. Well, Fazl and Khalid gathered together a panel of scholars from around the Muslim world, and they drew up a declaration which can be found on the website. And it was launched in 2015 on the in Istanbul. We all gathered at a hotel there, and Islamic Relief Worldwide collaborated and helped to pay for everything. And the publicity was done by people also. We had an organisation at that time called Muslim Climate Action, which was mostly young women, a couple of young men as well. And that had been a long time ambition of Fazl and Khalid's to get something like that organised. And it did work very well that year. And they had delegations to the Paris conference on the COP, it's called Conference of Parties from the United Nations, organised by the United Nations. We had one in Glasgow this year, and we did quite a lot of stuff for that. But they also
was that link with COP26? The one in Glasgow?
26 COPs there have been. Not one of them have they mentioned in, apparently, renewable energy. I can't believe that. I really don't believe that. Mm-hmm. But having looked at the government's behaviour and how it always goes to the conventional fuels like coal and gas and fossil fuels and subsidises them heavily and pays the money to go researching for new oil in the North Sea and saying, oh, it's a very good intermediate transition fuel. And now there's this huge crisis over prices of gas and Russian gas and so on. They're still saying the same thing, and it really is the time to be changing from gas and to less polluting fuels. And the power stations are still using coal. I didn't believe that when I heard it. They're still using it. They're biomass. They put some of them on biomass, which is imported from Canada, trees, and all sorts of things like that. There are people like I can't remember the name of it now. My name memory has deserted me.
It's the same for all of us.
I know it so well.
It's right on your tongue.
Ecotricity. They were trying to make their own gas out of grass, I think. And another green supply that we've been on for some time called Bulb. They were making it out of pig manure and also offsetting what they couldn't make by paying people to grow trees and things. So, but all these companies have been forced to their backs to the wall by this crisis over gas, and the government has a cap on what companies are allowed to charge to customers. So that's made them all go bankrupt. And Bulb, I know about because it's my company that we've been on for years. And they actually gone into special administration, which is not quite the same thing. They're allowed to carry on selling what they've already been selling. So we're sticking with them at the moment.
All right. So there are some different options. So what do you think as Muslims? I mean, you sound like you were an activist for a long time, and it's like something like...
Well, activist requires getting out of the house and going somewhere a long way away, quite often in a car or a van or a trainer, taking usually large piles of books and equipment and other...
Well, so you've done workshops.
Being an activist, though, it's not just those people who protest.
For miles and miles in the pouring rain or the snow.
Yeah, and I know you've done workshops.
I'm not doing it anymore.
You've done
feeble.
Yeah, you've done workshops as well. I remember in Living Islam camp.
Yes,
workshop for the youth there.
I did that every time they have camp, which is every 2 or 3 years since 2005 till 2011, I think, or maybe 13.
No, it was 14, 16 even.
It's a very amazing legacy you're leaving. You've created for your kids and grandkids, mashallah.
So why do you think as Muslims we have as Muslims an equal or greater responsibility to really make sure that we are caring for the environment?
We have it all in the Quran. It's our duty as khulafa. Some people think khulafa means that we are stewards, and it's quite a popular idea, which is good because it makes people think responsibly. The Quran is not quite so clear on the matter. Khalifa means somebody who succeeds somebody else. And when Allah said, I'm going to the angels, I'm going to create a Khalifa on the earth, it doesn't say who he's going to create the Khalifa for, to succeed. And it doesn't say, I'm going to create a Khalifa for myself on the earth. So people who say Khalifa Allah is definitely, as far as I'm concerned, no, cannot be a Khalifa for Allah. If Allah shut his eyes for 1 second or stopped doing what he does for 1 second, the universe would just disappear. So nobody can substitute for Allah. But Khalifa can mean anything, be succeeding the dinosaurs or succeeding the
previous generations, kind of a button.
Well, there weren't any previous generations of humans, so it must be something with but
I suppose
anyway.
Animals have got a good way of taking care of the earth by being part of the
so everybody in the Quran, it says everything in the earth, everything in the heavens and earth and what's between them worships or glorifies Allah. And so do some humans, though for some others, many others, are worthy of blame, it says. And human beings are the odd ones out because they don't always do it. And they should do it. And as soon as they stop, then they get into trouble.
Yeah, it's because we have the choice. We have the choice to do good or the choice to doing bad. Angela, do you have any question particularly you want to ask Harfiyah?
I just, for me, it would be more personal. How did your work with the environment? How did you transfer to your kids, to your grandkids? How are you able to get them to embrace?
I don't know if I did, but I keep trying.
And do you have any advice for the rest of us?
Sometimes give them a copy of the climate change book, and they sort of say, "Oh, thank you, Granny," and put it somewhere they never see again. But it's very difficult for anybody to make the arguments get through to people. Even the Prophet didn't manage to get his arguments through to everybody. Peace be upon him. And the Quran is always consoling him and said, "Can you make the dead hear? And can you make the deaf hear? And the blind?" And
it's difficult to get the kids.
People's attitudes. Have you seen the film Don't Look Up? Because
part of it, yes.
It's a amazing study of why people don't listen to what they should be listening to, which is really urgent. It's going to be the death of a whole planet if they don't listen to it. And They just don't want to know. They're just hiding it from themselves. And Quran is a study in that as well, because it's talking about the kafirun, the people who don't want to see things. They cover it up from themselves. Their ears are deaf and their eyes are blind, and they don't want to know. And the reasons for that depends on their self-interest. And
I have a hard time getting the kids to, on principle, listen. They believe in the environment, taking care of the environment. But when it comes to doing a simple thing as putting the correct items into the correct containers, the paper,
you have to start at the age of 1. I never did.
the food bin, and all of that. It seems like
a lady they're
not really into it. They forget. They're careless about it. I have a question. I'm curious about one thing. Do you think it's more important to use electricity to move forward as a way to help the environment, or is it to grow more trees?
Well, electricity depends what you use to make the electricity. As I was saying, they still use coal and biomass and gas to make most of our electricity. So we have to be careful where we're buying the electricity from to do that. Electricity, they'd had a lot of pumps installed around the country on motorway service stations and things, but I don't know if they've managed to keep that up. And there are so many people competing, like Tesla has extra high-speed chargers and things like that. So it's a bit of a jungle out there. Personally, I have a hybrid, because a hybrid makes its own electricity from a very small amount of petrol that it uses. I filled it up yesterday with half full. It was about £20 to fill it the rest of the way. And I can get around for months on that amount of petrol when in the hybrid, because most of my driving is in cities where you go very slowly and the engine turns itself off most of the time and it takes over the battery. So, that's quite useful. And you never have to sit for hours waiting for a battery to charge in a service station or even at home. So that, for me, is the ideal car at the moment. But I'm still waiting for an improvement. They're talking a lot, especially in America, about hydrogen cell propulsion, which doesn't make any emissions at all. It works on separating the hydrogen from water, I think, by electrolysis. So, but they still haven't solved the problems. Partly they're doing some trials in the north of England with various towns on hydrogen power cars. And there's a talk of British Gas mixing hydrogen with natural gas or going over to hydrogen altogether. But that is the excuse they made for selling me a new gas boiler when I was quite determined not to have one. But I told me that with a house like ours, which is quite large and old-fashioned and has got some insulation but not enough, and has solid brick walls which are not insulatable without spending tens of thousands of pounds on it. And we just had no boiler because our boiler broke down. So we didn't have time to even think about it. So we got another boiler, which they said would be suitable to use with hydrogen if that ever happened. But that's not going to happen for years.
Can you tell us more about the trees? Like, how do you think, because we're chopping down all the trees, that's why the environmental problem is happening with the poles melting?
Well, that's a big factor in this. I mean, they're chopping them down at an incredible rate and burning them as well. And this causes more carbon to enter the atmosphere, all the burning, and it reduces the capacity of the earth to absorb the carbon that it's already got. So planting trees is very important, and IFEES has something called Schools for Trees, which is its contribution. And we also went with a London Islamic environmental group called Line. We went to Willowbrook Farm and planted 1,000 trees on that near Oxford.
Is it just me, or does it seem like the government doesn't promote it as much as they should? Like, it's so important to plant more trees. It's very good at saying
it's going to do things, and then it doesn't do them, especially this government. In some ways, this country has been a leader but there are other countries also leading, and I think ours is getting left behind now. The COP was pretty much of a disaster, but there are some things going on nevertheless. The one in Glasgow, I mean.
Yeah, it's all in its infancy, a lot of this, and hopefully it'll improve.
Infancy. It's been going on for decades now. This is the 26th COP, and they only happen every other year or something. And then still, after all that time, they've been just talking and blah blah, as Greta says, and they haven't doing anything, not doing anything anywhere near enough.
Yeah, it's true. So I'd like to go back on sort of more the family-oriented approach of being greener. And this interview as well will be part of our show on how to have a healthier Ramadan. So obviously we will be talking about the food, etc. But what is your advice for families now here in Britain? How would you see a better, greener Ramadan for people? What sort of things are you?
Well, there's all sorts of things you can do in Ramadan. Eating less food is good.
It's a good start.
It reduces the load on your body to have to feed it all the time and go to the loo every 5 minutes. That's just a problem. And then you have time to think about something else, like the environment and how you can help and read and do your work and not spend your whole time eating and drinking.
Yeah, and in terms of what we've noticed, and this is why we wanted you to be on, especially at this time, but we probably will have you on again talking about other more issues, because it's such a broad subject. But we wanted you to be on sort of now, because in Ramadan, we've noticed there's a huge amount of waste. So you mentioned the food, there's too much food. So if you go to an iftar in a mosque, it's all, styrofoam and plastic, disposable paper plates and very little recyclable paper plates available, or even people taking their stuff. So, and also in the home, what sort of things can family do to increase that awareness? You were starting to mention a family with a 1-year-old. They had done something, to help. When we asked you about how you can instill that interest in recycling, you wanted to say a story. That's gone. But basically, what sort of things, like as a family, what can people do
to put things away in the right places as part of the environmental care? As I was going to say, there was a lady in Egypt, a boy of 2, very intelligent family, and she taught him to put everything away when he was 2, and he was doing it religiously all the time, and it was brilliant. I never managed to get my children to do that.
Yeah, I'm quite strict in my house, actually. The children are found that, alhamdulillah, managed to from very early on. But
it's a game. If we can get it to be a game, get them to put it away.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I think one of my husband's grandchildren is getting to that point where she can do it.
Yeah.
But if everybody was taught that from birth, it would be so wonderful, and people would be living much better lives.
Yes, and not throw things in the street as well. That's a good thing to start with.
People just do. They throw things. They think that rivers are like waste bins, and they're not. And even people in Egypt, where it's so dry and they have to have everything in canals, they will put every bit of waste in the canal. And in the village where my husband was brought up, I don't suppose they used to do it then, but now you go back, it's full of plastic bottles and cans and everything else that you can. And here you get prams and shopping trolleys and all sorts of stuff dumped in rivers. It's just unbelievable that people don't respect water enough to stop doing that.
So there's that, and you said, so is there any sort of resources on the website that people can go to have ideas?
IFEES has got lots of resources on the website, and projects like plastic-free iftar,
fantastic,
green mosques, and khutbahs about the environment that you can get your imams to talk about. We've also got, on the XR side, we've got something called Greening the Mosques, which is a project whereby children in schools all over the world are being asked to write letters to their local imams to make them talk more about the environment and how we can help preserve it and look after it and grow things. A lot of schools in Africa, when 1976, when I went there, were also already farm schools. They were growing their own vegetables and fruit. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. And I think that has been taken up in Indonesia a lot. There's some people there, they call it pesantren, eco-pesantren, which is a boarding school, like Islamic boarding school. And they grow their own foods.
That's an amazing idea. It's an amazing idea, farm schools.
It's amazing, but it's not spread enough.
Yeah, it shows that basically the individual, every individual can do something, but if we all do a little bit, it all goes together and changes on the greater scale.
And it's also very good for psychology and therapy for people to do gardening. Our local mosque, Covers Green in London, that has its own herb garden, and it's planted olive trees and fruit trees all around its premises. And what else are they? They've got solar panels on the roof, which is a great ambition for me to get everybody on solar panels. There's a very nice picture I've got of a lady in Morocco.
Oh, that's really nice. I like that.
Sitting there saying, "Oh, mosque powers the whole village with solar energy," and it was great. And there's overseas in Morocco and Jordan, particularly, they've taken on the idea of green mosques, and Indonesia, and they're trying to get all the local mosques onto solar panels and green water recycling and all this stuff. So they've taken it much more than we have here. We've got a few mosques doing that sort of thing, but very few. And you have no government backing, so it doesn't help very much.
Yeah, Turkey as well is very big on solar energy. Virtually every house has solar panels, and they use that to heat up the water tanks that they have on the roofs. Yeah, I was really impressed about that. Right, this concludes our interview, and it was really, really lovely to have you. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll put, as usual, all of the details, the websites, different websites and books that you have mentioned on our YouTube description when we put up the interview. But also, obviously, everybody can always email us at info@heritageradio.org.uk if you've missed anything and you want to find out more about all this. Angela, to conclude?
It was lovely talking to you, and we need to bring you back on the show for more, talk more about the family and spreading the awareness to the kids. You probably have really good ideas.
Inshallah khair. Thank you very much. We wish you a very, very nice day, inshallah.
Have a nice day.
You take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
I really love this sort of discussions that we're having, where we can learn new things and explore how we can just become healthier and better. Because when you think about wellness, we generally only think about our bodies and the food, the drink, the fitness.
But it's more than that.
It's so much more than that. It's the environment, is how we interact with nature, is how, because ultimately all of these things affect us, don't they? Our bodies, our mind.
Of course.
And this is all part of wellness.
You heard of microplastics in our, they found microplastics in somebody's blood?
Yeah, that's
now, there's other sources saying it's not as widespread as they're trying to make it seem, but that's enough. Like, we just don't need to get to the point where...
Okay, so for instance, I know that an Indian team had found a bacteria that can break down plastic and digest it.
And I hope it becomes used widely.
From you can see over the centuries and whatever, and even recently, that nature adapts, the earth adapts, we adapt as well to the new environment we're in. I don't think if we put someone 1,000 years ago, even 500 years ago, in our environment, they would struggle to breathe. They would, because their lungs are not. We are born into this environment. We can sustain a level of pollution in our lungs, etc. And it's, but Having said that, why add extra work, extra difficulty for our bodies to work if we can avoid it? So obviously, yes, there's going to be now plastic in our bloodstream. The body will have to try and break it down
But it's always been developed for making things easier for us. But they never used to think before they invented something or put it into use how it's going to be in 20 years. It was all about now, because we just have our we don't set our sights to the future, like how is this going to be good in the long term. We only care about how it's making things better for us now, and this is what's happening now with fuel, fossil fuel, and the environment. But so now in Ramadan,
exactly, to go back to Ramadan,
it's a good time. That's when you get a lot of Muslims' attention, right? Because they come to the mosque, they try to be more spiritual.
We have a heightened awareness of things, don't we, during Ramadan?
And because we're fasting and we're hungry, and our brain thinks all about, oh, what deliciousness we're gonna have at the end of it. But then comes with it when we go to gatherings, all the plastic and all the junk drinks, because it's junk, whatever they drink. Bottles of Coca-Cola is not something you should be giving your plants. Never mind your body when it's been fasting all day.
Yeah, Coca-Cola has a place, and
it's
to use as a cleaner,
as a metaphor. But all those companies that give you those drinks, that's not something you should be feeding yourself. Don't even give it to your plants. Seriously, guys. So I'm gonna say this: Ramadan is not about food. Nope. Even though we make a big deal about it, it's not about food. It is about ibadah, worshiping Allah extra, fasting. It's about restriction, and a restriction is more than just not eating, and not eating and not doing all these other things, right? It is about caring about what we do the whole month, in fact the whole year. But Ramadan is a good reset point. But if we're spending all our time in Ramadan thinking about what we're gonna eat and making 7-course meals, then I'm sorry, we're doing the wrong thing here, right? We really need to plus imagine the ladies who are in the kitchen all day cooking. They're not spending time, and that's a good time to read Quran. It's a good time to memorize surahs. It's a good time to do more du'as. It's a good time to come back to Allah. But they're faced with feeding their families, everybody putting in their requests, making Ramadan very hard for whoever's cooking, mostly moms. Okay, let's just say in our community, mostly women cook, and it's a burden. It's a burden because if you're worried about what everybody's going to eat, you don't have time to sit and think about improving yourself spiritually, and that's not fair. That's not fair that people do that. On top of it, we eat food that's not good for us because when you're hungry, you're thinking of all these desserts and all these things. We eat a lot of fried foods. Okay, fried foods with vegetable oil. So if we're gonna get anything out of this, I'm gonna say you need to worry about your eating your sugar and remove seed oils from your diet. They need to go to the bin, okay? Especially vegetable oils, because they affect your cell growth, your cells, and they make your new cells sick. So you can't face problems like toxins and the environmental problems. Like when you're out walking around, you're breathing all those toxins. If your cells are not strong, you can't deal with it. You get sick. Sugar is another level. It causes diabetes. It causes cancer. But also your cells, if they're not strong from eating seed oils, and seed oils are in everything. So I'm gonna say, read your labels. Anything that has a commercial and a song with it, don't have it, okay? And Ramadan is a good time to start eating homemade foods and simple things, right? And if you're gonna still eat samosas, at least do something else, like get coconut oil and use that, or bake them in the oven. But don't eat deep fried stuff, guys. This is dangerous.
And also I think for the recycling, it's quite important to encourage mosques so for instance in Eccles Mosque a few years ago, before COVID, when we had iftars again, in those times we had managed to encourage people to come with their own plates and
such a good
cups.
idea.
So not everybody managed to do it and everything. And or when we have ladies gatherings as well, ladies like lunch togethers and stuff, we say, come on, bring a dish and bring your own crockery. Take them home in a plastic bag, wash them at home. It's easy when you think about it. It really is easily done. You can find good quality not necessarily disposable, reusable, crockery in supermarkets. You just use them. They're easy, they're lightweight. And if you have to use disposable, just use recycled plastic paper plates.
The other thing, mosques can keep a stash of crockery in the mosque for people who just come off the street or who don't have time to get it. They should have that too.
Yeah. And
then they're easy to wash.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we can do our bit. And Muslims do have that, we have that upper hand. We know about Allah and how we should care about our environment. And we know now, if we didn't know before, that the plastics are terrible for the environment. So we should be the forefronters, like the pioneers in doing these things.
I mean, there's something I have to say, I can say about Manchester recycling system, okay? So a few years ago with my son, we went on an outing and we visited the recycling facility somewhere in South Manchester. It was really, really interesting because my original idea was I need to lobby them so that they recycle more plastic. But over there, I actually understood why. For instance, in Greater Manchester, we only we actually put in the recycle bin the bottles that are shaped the plastic, that are shaped like bottles, and not the caps, and not other type of plastic wrappers, food containers, etc. Because they are not good quality plastic, they cannot be recycled, those wrappers and plastic containers. But bottles are good, the plastic that actually is recyclable fully. So that's why in Greater Manchester, that's how they recycle things. In other parts of the country, they say, put everything in one bin and we'll sort it out. And you think, all of this plastic has been recycled. London, for instance, my mother-in-law knows this. And actually, no, they're tricking you. There's a lot in that bin that will never be recycled.
What happens to it?
So in Greater Manchester, what they do, they send this by train to Runcorn, which is not far. So it's already fairly low carbon footprint transport. They get it to a plant in Runcorn, which is then burned or incinerated, and that energy from the burning, is reused to power a plant that's next to it, which incidentally produces chlorine. Okay, so chlorine is useful as a.
You mean bleach?
No, chlorine is like similar to bleach.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's what you use in. But it's not as toxic as bleach, obviously, and it is used in swimming pools, and it's used in our drinking water. Okay, so it's basically the plastic that cannot be recycled, reused, is burned with the rest of your household waste. And the plastic that can be recycled is then properly recycled and reused, etc. So I was actually quite impressed, and it changed my opinion of what should be recycled and what should be not, and why is Greater Manchester doing things like this so restrictively, just what's bottled, shaped as a bottle. Because in other parts of the country there was a big issue in Swindon, for instance, where the council decided to not collect plastic anymore and just have it in the household waste. And their explanation was this, is that we tell you that we collect plastic to recycle it, but then when we give it to the recycling companies, they ship all that bad quality plastic that they pretended was going to be, or made you believe that was going to be recycled and that you did a good deed. Actually, they ship this over to Asia. So Malaysia, for instance, has got a whole city-size plastic mountain. It's as big as a city, and it's just our plastic bags. So you can see them. You can see the plastic bags from our local supermarkets. You can see the brands on it's horrendous, and these are basically the dumps from our city. So actually, I felt better in Greater Manchester. I thought actually they were doing things better than other parts of the country. I understood why Swindon stopped doing the recycling. I think that was a few years ago, so they might have found another solution now to this. But they were fed up pretending that they were recycling when they were actually not recycling. When it's not them, the city council obviously, but the people they had commissioned it to. So do your duty to really carefully separate your different bits of recycling. Don't throw in your bins what shouldn't be in your bins. Don't throw in your recycling what shouldn't be in recycling, because it affects the level of recycling that can be done, and it affects also the money that can be made from the recycling. So it has a chain effect. If you're not careful, if you're careless, it will affect down the road how much the council can recycle, how much money the company can get back from this recycling to then improve the environment. So yes, I am very, very, very keen on that. Quite annoyed when people just can't be bothered. You know, just a little bit of an effort. It takes you a second of your time to think, and then when you have a habit, when you have a habit,
and
that's
that goes
it.
to find ways to not use plastic, and it ties back to raw iftars, to eat in crockery instead of plastics and throw away. So because imagine what you have at an iftar with so many people times 30. That's an incredible waste and damage to the environment that we're contributing to. Anyways, I'm gonna say one more thing about food. If it's possible, at the mosque, the leadership of the mosque, when they order food from caterers, to ask the caterers to use ghee when they're cooking the food for people, because ghee is good for you. It's something your body recognizes. The vegetable oils that come in curries that you buy from takeaways is horrible for your health, for your arteries. So please think about this.
Ghee is more expensive, but it's worth the extra expense when you cook. First of all, it gives us such a nicer flavor. And if you ask a lot of my Asian friends, it's like, oh, that's what my mom always used to do, but then she was told she shouldn't. So they'll go back to ghee. Yeah, go ahead.
It's what you need.
Happily.
And it brings out all the goodness of all the beautiful Indian spices through ghee.
Yeah, and it's used actually in Ayurvedic medicine, which is a traditional approach to health in Asia. It's used as one of the remedies. So seriously,
we need to go back to it. And if you can make your mosque do that, at least start using ghee at home.
So we really hope, really do hope that if you have access to the mosque leadership, try and encourage them. If you have ways of making the change yourself, do it. Make the changes in your home. There's loads and lots of ways. So we're going to sort of conclude our show now, but please stay tuned in, because